just stare at the camera?
Yeah.
Hello.
Hello, folks. Hello, folks. All right. Do your thing. Whenever you're ready.
Oh, you want me to start?
I want you to start.
Yeah. Cool.
Cool.
Dude, you look so chill right now.
Thanks. You look pretty chill. You look pretty chill too. I'll be honest. In the lotus pose.
Yeah. So, Max, I'm happy to be having this conversation with you because since the last time I saw you, I did this Vision Fast trip, and I thought that'd be a good place to start.
Awesome.
Should we talk about that?
Awesome.
Yeah. So, I've been a meditation teacher for about 7 years. Before that, was still practicing, and it's been like a big focus of my life to find the truth, like be a seeker and challenge what other people have told me to believe. And so in January, I transitioned out of that role. And this year has been a time to take some space and go in a little bit of a different direction, which has been like taking myself outside and going into the wilderness. And so last month was a 10-day experience in the wilderness. 3.5 days were fasting alone in this canyon with no tent and minimal equipment to be like exposed at the deepest levels to being, to nature. And that was quite a trip for me.
3.5 days of fasting?
Yeah. That's right. And actually, you know, that wasn't the hardest part for me. The hardest part, it was like a psychological experience. You know, going without the normal activities of your life and your phone and your relationships, and you're just with yourself out there. That was a trip.
So what was the hardest part psychologically? Or what was so difficult about being alone with yourself?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And you know, when a person meditates, they're kind of doing that, right? You're kind of saying like, well, I'm going to put everything else on pause and just be in the moment with myself. Mm-hmm. What I realized about myself is I'm pretty good at being like, cool, I'm going to do a 20-minute meditation, and even if things are like uncomfortable, I'm like, well, it's only 20 minutes, like I can sit here for that. But being out in the desert, I mean, for days, you know, if you're uncomfortable, or for me, I have pretty dynamic moods, and so if I'm like in a really tough mood, there's nowhere to go, and it's not like I can do my 20-minute meditation and then go watch TV or like do something else. You're just there with yourself. There's no getting away from reality. Also, the not eating kind of shifts things, and being out in the sun kind of shifts things.
Sounds brutal.
Yeah.
So what type of things came up that you weren't expecting?
Well, one thing that happened, which was really cool, was I went with a group of people, right, and then we separated to our individual locations. And so one of the guides gave us a suggestion of a ceremony to do, which was to the larger context of the ceremony was to prepare for your death.
Amazing.
It was to plant both your feet firmly on the road to death, which is to plant both your feet firmly on the road to the rest of your life. Mm-hmm. To say, okay, I'm going to die. Mm-hmm. So like, let's go. Let's live this life.
Love that.
And as part of that, he said, hold a death lodge ceremony, which is a ceremony to invite the people in your life to make amends with everybody you need to make amends with so that you're ready to die. And of course, I was alone, so I didn't physically invite anybody, but it was a kind of like inviting the spirits of these people and having conversations with them to like completely clear the air as if I was on my deathbed, because I didn't want to take any of that resentment or guilt with me. And so he said, around the world, these conversations tend to look similarly. They tend to be some version of, I love you, thank you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, and goodbye. And so what happened when I was out there is I was like, cool, I'll just like see, who I need to have these conversations with. Like, obviously I have people that I love and want to say thank you to and say sorry to. And I started to make a little list, and it was like 50 people. I just had all these people come up in my mind that I found that I was holding some resentment for or some guilt about. There's the guy I was in 5th grade that came up. I was like, oh man, I like resent this guy from the 5th grade. Do I really need to be carrying that around in my life? So it was like this deep spiritual, psychological cleansing of all of the stuff that I'd been carrying with all these relationships.
Wow. That's amazing.
And at the end of it, I just felt really different. I felt really clear, really clean. Like I felt open in this way where I was like, man, how am I living my life that I'm like collecting all of these like resentments and it's like guilt and unspoken things. Like, I don't want to live my life that way.
The death ceremony. That's like, I know in ancient Greece they used to have there was this place dedicated where people would go, and it would be some type of retreat type thing, like what you did, combined with some type of psychedelic experience, and it was basically supposed to facilitate the process of death and rebirth. And like once you came back from that, there's like sources of Plato going there and then coming back and him writing the dialogues. There's like stories like that, obviously, like maybe who knows if they're true or not, but it was seen as this death ceremony, even thousands of years ago, was seen as like a fundamental pillar to the life now, for how much like potential it has. Like in accepting your death, what does it do? Like it gives you so much freedom in every respect, because there's like, if you say, all right, I'm going to die, like even if you think like maybe you're thinking now like you're stressed about something, like, all right, I'm gonna die tonight, it's like, okay, it doesn't really matter what happens today. Like, I mean, I'm going to try to make the most out of this day, but like, I'm not going to let the little stuff like bother me. If this really is my last, like, if I have like 4 hours left, I'm not going to let the little stuff bother me if I know I'm going to die tonight. So it's just like a cool way to frame it. Doesn't have to be true. Like, sometimes you can frame things for yourself that aren't true, and they can still be really useful for you. It's like,
yeah,
like that process of death and rebirth. Like, so do you feel like you've changed fundamentally, or where's the change for you? Do you feel like before and after this experience?
Yeah, what's interesting is the experience was very, very powerful for me. And then, of course, I come back from the desert to my house and my wife and my family and my job. And there's for me, been a really lengthy and intense integration process. To be like, okay, I had that experience. How does that connect and influence how I live this life? And I'm still in that process. I mean, I actually think it took me about a month to come back home fully. To be like, okay, like some of the things were easy where I was like, wow, it's so good to see my wife. Like, yes. And like, I like this poem, yes. And the job took a little while, but I was like, okay, yes. It was almost like I was reborn and getting the chance to choose again what elements of my life I actually wanted to participate in. You know, like yes to this, yes to this. Some things I was like, nope, like I don't need to do that anymore.
So after that yes and no process, what are you still dealing with? Like, what's there left that feels unreconciled?
Yeah, good question. Well, in a practical sense, one of the questions that I took with me into the desert was, what am I doing with my life? Which could be like, what am I doing with my career? But also in a spiritual sense of like, why was I born? Like, what's my purpose? What am I here to do? And so I took that question into the desert, and I meditated and I journaled, and I was in dialogue with the different elements out there and the different animals, and in dialogue with my heart, asking those sorts of questions. And that is, I would say, the primary focus of my integration that is still mysterious for me.
Did you feel like you came to any
Yeah.
Did you feel like you came to any conclusions about your purpose that you had never thought of before?
One thing that happened on the last night of being alone, so on the third night of fasting, I stayed up all night. And this was another ceremony that was invited. I stayed up all night in this circle, and this was like, you know, I'm at my tiredest, most hungry, kind of worn out, and I stood in that circle asking this question, what am I here for? And it was a prayer for me. The prayer was like, okay, I'm here, I've done all this work, I'm here proving my strength, so like, please, God, spirits, ancestors, universe, like, tell me what I'm here to do, like, give me my sacred purpose for this life. And I'm here standing all night in this circle to prove that I'm strong enough to actually enact it, if you give it to me. And so I did that, and I was chanting and singing and praying and watching the stars move. And then I'm doing this because I was watching the stars. I'm like, okay, it's like the morning's coming pretty soon, and when morning comes, you go back to the camp, and that's kind of the end of the big thing. I was like, nothing real dramatic's happened yet. I haven't got this huge flash. And so I checked in with my heart. I was like, am I doing this right? Am I praying right? Am I asking the right questions? And my heart said, why are you looking for a God that's outside of yourself? And there's a lot for me to contemplate around that. But in the moment, what happened is I was like, oh, I'm not here to prove to something external that I'm strong enough and to ask something external for my vision, for my purpose. I'm here to show myself that I'm strong enough. And I had the insight that I already know, like my heart already knows my purpose, and being in relationship with myself in a deep way reveals my purpose almost like in every moment. And so then my prayers were like, I'm standing here for myself to prove that I'm strong enough so that I know in my bones that I can move through the world in relationship with my heart, in alignment with the purpose that is unfolding. And that was kind of the biggest epiphany of that night.
Mm.
And I've taken that into, like your question was, as I integrate this, that's really come with me. It's like, how do I keep nourishing that relationship with my deep self?
Well, that sounds a lot like what I think the solution to, or like people's misconception about confidence, I feel like whether they realize that or not, is like they're looking for some type of like external validation. But really, like the only way to build confidence is to prove to yourself that you have the potential. Like you could do 1,000 things, prove to other people, everyone could believe you do it, but that doesn't mean you yourself believe it. It's like you have to do difficult things in your own eyes, and then watch yourself, and then acknowledge that you've done something hard, and like that accumulation of it builds confidence. But like that, what you were saying before, like, or like my summary or my understanding of what you were saying before was, so I think there are like two kind of different like pieces to reality, or maybe more, but there's like true external reality that we don't really have direct contact with. It's like we can't get at it because we don't have all the senses necessary to understand all of it. It's in higher dimensions or something like that, or whatever, rationalize it however you want. But then there's personal reality, and that's true in its own way, and everyone has their own personal reality. So really the world you're interacting with is your interpretation, your ability to interpret reality, and like this construct, this narrative of what reality is that you've made for, it's your worldview, it's what you've made for yourself. So what you were saying before, like when you're saying that I am the one, I don't need to be asking these external things, like if you believe that you are the one who you need to be asked, that you're in control, then you are in control. Like you decide that because you're building your own reality.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like an objective outside thing. It's something like that you have control over. That's why I think like lying to yourself, like when I talked about don't lie to yourself, but here I am saying lie to yourself, like believe that you're some like Christ-like figure. Believe that you have the capacity to do whatever you want, to change the world or do whatever your highest ideal is. Because like that, it's kind of like manifesting, but I mean some people I feel like misinterpret what manifesting is. Like you can't wish for there like to be like a water slide to pop up there, but I feel like you can almost like change like the tint of your glasses, like in I can't say it. Kant has like in his Critique of Pure Reason, he's talking about like, he has this great quote. It's like time tinted and causation tinted sunglasses, and it's like the whole world, like everything, like your whole interpretation of reality is tinted by your ability to understand it and make sense of it. And so it's like acknowledging that you're not interacting with the real world gives you some ability to kind of manipulate it to your own advantage.
Mm-hmm.
And like I don't know if enough people are using that because it's so powerful.
I love that. Yeah, what tint am I wearing in my sunglasses, and how is that limiting my experience of the world?
And what tint could I change to? And how, like, what new places could that lead me?
I love that.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I think that's key to our future as a species, is being able to have the strength or courage or creativity to take off a tint and completely reimagine the world.
Yeah, I mean, that would be difficult for someone that wasn't very high in openness.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just really inspired by this conversation and just like the way that you think, Max, and the way that you interview people, because like you're the next generation of people. You guys, your generation are gonna be the decision makers. And to have like this openness to completely changing a belief system and not just inheriting the beliefs that the older generation has given you, like that's so key. And I see that too with like with the coming psychedelic revolution. as I think is coming. Like people being open, first of all, to saying like, oh, this drug is, like, we've been lied to. This drug is not dangerous, whatever drug it is. And there are some drugs that are dangerous, but the way to have the openness to be like, oh, what's here for me to learn about myself or the world from psychedelics? And then like be in a relationship with these fungi, these plant medicines, to completely change our experience and our beliefs about the world. Like we need that, because the beliefs of our parents and grandparents, like, they're not working. It's not working for anybody anymore.
Well, yeah, because they're so old, they don't apply to the world today.
It's like, yeah, we're in some trouble. We need some really new creative ideas, and it's quite inspiring to, like I said, to experience the openness of the younger generations.
I mean, I don't know if that's everyone. I don't know if, I think there's definitely a spectrum of openness even like within our generation, because I don't know if there was like a radical increase in openness going into our generation. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if our generation is more open than your generation. I'm only speaking for myself. But I guess something that I think about is, or like that I'm thinking about right now, is like, could these psychedelic experiences throw me totally off balance? Like, because I'm so open and so willing to have to change my beliefs, would I be more ready to, like, because you want to have something of a stable worldview, at least to some degree, to keep like continuity. But you also want to be able to balance it with like seeing new perspectives and such. But like, I wonder if a psychedelic experience could, combined with my openness, completely shift my worldview and like put me on a whole new path that like maybe I wasn't. I mean, you can't say you weren't supposed to be on, but it would throw me somewhere that I never have been before, and I don't know like if I would really want to be there. Just shift my perspective in such like a fundamental way that I wouldn't even know where I was. Like almost getting lost.
Yeah, it's an important question, and I know some people that have had that happen in some uncomfortable ways, and it's important to be really careful with this stuff. And somebody your age you're still getting your feet on the ground of your life. I'm not that much older than you. I'm 32, so I've had my feet on the ground as an adult a little bit longer. One of the things that is really interesting about plant medicine is that for a lot of people, it can work with you and help you with what you're looking for. And so your intention with engaging with it changes what happens. So if you're like at a party and you're really drunk and you're like, oh, it's psychedelics, like you might have a really unpleasant experience. But if you're really intentional and you're like, hey, I want some insight into this deep question, and I want to be careful, and I don't want this to disrupt my whole life, and you engage with it respectfully and carefully, oftentimes what people find is that plants take care of you. And that's not always the case, and it's really important for people to do the research and work with people who are experienced if they're new to psychedelics, because some people have kind of like
underlying schizophrenia,
or psychotic breaks, even if they don't have any awareness that they have that in them. So it is really something to be taken seriously. But a lot of the intention weighs into your experience in a way that's kind of magical.
Like people talk about the environment, but it's like your own mental environment is like what I think of like when you're saying intention. It's like, what is your purpose through this experience? What are you trying to gain out of it?
Yeah.
Maybe it won't show you what you're expecting. Maybe it'll be completely different from what you think it's going to be like. And then that would be another fundamental piece of it moving into that experience would be to acknowledge the fact that maybe this will be radically different from what I expect it to be like.
Yeah.
And just being willing to accept that. But at least having some kind of scaffolding for like what you're trying to do, like maybe not even like a goal, but like more of like an alignment type thing, of where you're, of like what general direction you're trying to head in.
Yeah, and I'm biased because I've been a meditation teacher, but the skill set of a meditator is really helpful in those kinds of experiences where you're like, psychedelics can completely change everything that you thought you knew about the world. And so having the ability to like be with yourself during discomfort, having the ability to have mindfulness of like, okay, I'm having this thought, but that thought doesn't need to control me, or like I have this anxiety, but that doesn't need to control me. Like that is, I would almost recommend anyone who thinks that they want to explore psychedelics to like have a meditation practice. Again, like I said, I'm biased, but that's so helpful because meditation is a really similar experience, I think, for a lot of people, where you are able to get in touch with yourself on a deep level and have your beliefs questioned about the world. Kind of countercultural or rebellious to practice meditation.
Why? It's so in right now.
It is really in right now. Yeah.
Why is it rebellious to meditate? Because it's like participating in that questioning and like me and Molly were talking about. We were like, it's so awesome. It's so hilariously obvious that like alcohol and caffeine and even things like Adderall are like readily available, like illegal, versus these other things like psychedelics, specifically because of the split between like efficiency and like maybe reduced efficiency as a result of like intense questioning everything. And so it's like people really like, that's all, like that was one thing I could take away from AP Euro this year is just like people want to maintain the status quo, the people in power. And then there's so like the central thing throughout the whole year was like status quo plus opposing force. And so that opposing force would be like this new psychedelic revolution type thing coming in and bringing all this questioning about like what society should be founded on, like anything relating to society. And then it always results in like basically a new reality, like a new synthesis of those two things. And that just repeats itself over and over again. We did like 100 of those equations. And so it's like right now, like what's the status quo? The status quo is like productivity, efficiency. What do you say?
Othering, like us versus them, I see as part of the status quo.
Interesting. That's almost like, I don't know if I would define that as a status quo, because it's like, it's almost like the foundation the status quo like lies on. Like the us versus them is so deeply ingrained in us that it's almost been throughout us it has been throughout us the entire time. Like, and it's still there. And acknowledging like that we're the same as our ancestors, like 15,000 years ago, those 50,000 years ago hunter-gatherers, like that tribalism exists within us. Like obviously that's why we have two competing parties. When you turn on the news, it looks like a fucking game show. Like that's exactly why. Like you're in an ideological fight right now that's not very different from a fight between two tribes over like resources, but now the resources clicks and like attention and power and like money.
And that's why I think meditation can be rebellious, because the status quo doesn't really want us to stop and think deeply about how to move through the world. Like the system wants us to engage with the system, whether it's capitalism or like racist structures in society, or the way that we collectively as dominant culture engage with the earth as like colonists and descendants of colonists in this country. Like the status quo wants us just to keep doing that. And so when you stop, and you stop fully enough to be like, wait, what are we doing? like, why are we doing this? Like, this isn't fair.
They want to prevent that from happening.
Yeah. And what I mean, I've been on a kick about this lately, but my question, I would say, of the last couple of weeks is, how can we make it accessible for more people to challenge their beliefs? Like, what do we need to offer people so that they can feel strong enough and confident enough for their beliefs to be challenged? And I think meditation is one of those things. I think psychedelics could be one of those things for people. But like, what can we offer, and offer it broadly, so that as a culture, more and more people can be like, wait, like, is this really how we want to engage with the planet? Is this really how we want to engage with people who are on the opposite side of the political spectrum? Mm-hmm. And I don't have the answer to that, but it's important.
In response to that, like, I think the problem can only be solved at an individual level, but staying at the individual level will never solve the problem. It needs to be like, there needs to be individual change for everyone. It's not like, which I guess is like, is that a societal change? Like, I guess kind of, but like, what you're talking about, I don't know, like, exactly like what problem we're even talking about, but anything, like, it needs to start at the individual level and then like grow out from there. Like, people need to realize it for themselves. Like, if you're trying to create like a cultural movement around people being more willing to accept their like beliefs, like, everyone has to do that for themselves. Like, it takes work to do that. Mm-hmm. And like, for me, it's weird because I don't even think about it like that. Like, because I'm so open to like having my beliefs or I think at least I'm open to having my beliefs challenged. Like, it's weird for me to even think that like you wouldn't want to have your beliefs challenged because it's like the only way to grow. Mm. So like, not having your beliefs challenged is like super counterproductive. Mm-hmm. So maybe you could just frame it like that. Mm. Maybe you can say that having your beliefs challenged is the most efficient mode of being for whatever you're trying to obtain, whether it's like happiness or like monetary success. Like, change is constant. That's like one of the main things. Like, Molly was talking to me about Octavia Butler, one of the characters in her books. The character starts a religion, and basically one of the foundations of the religion is God is change. And it's like, yeah, like, it's awful to see. Well, it's whatever. It's not your problem when you see someone like trying to cling on to something and it's just like clearly not happening, because it's never going to work out for them. Mm-hmm. Like, change is like the only constant. Mm. And not acknowledging that is so detrimental to everything. Mm-hmm. So if everyone could like get that same type of framing, same like viewpoint, mm-hmm. then they would definitely be more open to changing their beliefs, because they would see that as like an impediment to everything they want. Mm. All right, I have a question. Like, so, like in Buddhism, the Buddha basically said like, well, I saw something crazy. You know, like one of the first thing is life is suffering. I saw something and it was like a more accurate translation is life is what was it? Some other word, something like maybe not. Oh God, I can't think of it. Oh no, something like insufficient, or like limited, something like that. But it wasn't suffering. But whatever. Sorry, that was a tangent. Life is suffering. Suffering is caused by desire and attachment. So the Buddhist way would be to let go of attachment and desires. But how are you supposed to do anything without desires? Like, a goal is a desire. So like, I want to have that that chill mindset of like not being super attached to anything, being able to go with the flow like perfectly, like no roadblocks, like you swerve around those roadblocks easily, because it's like it's way more efficient and just like way more fun and like it's much easier.
Mm-hmm.
But then it's like, how do you get anything done if you don't have any goals, if you don't have any desires?
Mm-hmm.
So like my own kind of solution to that I'm rocking with right now, at least, is instead of like framing it like goals, it's like what I said, it's like aligning yourself in a certain direction. It's like holding certain like beliefs or like ideals or values or desires kind of like inside you, but not like so you want to go after not so you're going after like specific one, like that you're going to like, I need this, but like kind of like a journey type quest thing where you're moving in the general direction of whatever you've constructed to be like the highest goal, like area to move towards. Like for me it would be like the mythical top of the mountain. Like I'm trying to get to the top of the mountain, but then like I know that I'm gonna have to climb more mountains or something like that, or maybe that's not the actual end, or maybe at the top, or maybe whatever I found at the top of the mountain was actually like in my pocket the whole time or something like that. It's like then you come into like the here, like the now. Like when you were talking about like a little bit, it was just like right now is the only thing exists, which is a weird, like it's kind of a hard thing to think about, that like this is the only thing that exists right now.
Yeah. So I'm so with you in this line of thinking, and I was first introduced to Buddhism in college, and I was like, life is suffering, like I don't know about this.
Yeah, see, I never related to that.
And I kind of wrote it off until years later when I started to study Zen Buddhism, and I have for a while. I'm not an expert, but one of the ways to interpret that is that the Buddha offered like a way to be that allows us to not suffer, or not suffer as much. So a question I would pose to you is there a way for you to align yourself with a goal but not suffer if you don't achieve your expectations? Because you're right, it's really important to not just like, well, I'm not going to be attached to anything, I'm just going to like sit in this chair and not do anything. Like, the world needs people who are engaged, absolutely. But there's got to be somewhere in the middle where we're engaged. We have this like deep longing in our hearts for transformation, or for healing, or for change, or for maybe just success or purpose. But a way to engage with the unfolding of this moment in a way where we're not suffering.
I mean, like, it would be difficult, but ideally it would be like, all right, I'm trying to do this thing. Like, it's the highest moral thing that I can think of. But like, it really just doesn't matter if I achieve it or not. However, you can justify that to yourself, whether it's like, oh well, the world's a simulation, or I'm gonna die someday, or global warming, we're not gonna stop it, and everyone's gonna die, or like however you have to be. Like that balance you're talking about, you have to both feel like you're in control enough to like make a change, but then also be okay with realizing that honestly maybe that change might not happen. Like, you're probably gonna fail, and your one goal in life maybe won't be fulfilled. And then it's like, all right, what am I gonna do? What am I supposed to do from there? Like Jordan Peterson said something like, once you align yourself with the highest possible goal, then you don't really have to think about it so much, because it's like almost like it's built into you. Like it's built into you, and then so every morning you wake up and every little action you take, every step you take is inevitably bringing you closer or farther, depending on if you're going up or down, towards that goal. Like, every step is in a way bringing you closer to that goal, so there's meaning in every step you take. Because it's so like integrated in you, so like aligned with you. And so like that could be a way to find meaning. One thing me and Molly were talking about was like, after Nietzsche said God is dead and we have killed him, he basically said everyone has to create their own meaning, because there isn't like this this like an answer. So everyone has to figure it out for themselves, basically. So I'm thinking of like a bunch of different possible like options you can choose if you want to lead a meaningful life, which I think is like Viktor Frankl's one is a will to meaning, but Nietzsche's is a will to power, and I think it's somewhere in between there. It's like both a will to power but like for me I resonate way more with the will to meaning. So it's like how can you bring meaning into your life? There's like a bunch of different ways. And trying to kind of like map those out for people like to pursue that are in like some way practical. And one way would be to align yourself with the highest possible goal and feel like every step you take is in movement towards that goal.
Yeah. There's another way to think about what the Buddha said about suffering that's coming to mind as we're talking about this, which is that the root of suffering comes from the false belief in a separate, finite self, which could be called the ego. When we believe that we are separate and individual, that causes our attachments and our aversions and our suffering. And so a question is like, well, what does engaging with the world look like if I can let go of that belief that I am an individual, separate, finite self, that I'm separate from you, that I'm separate from this beautiful forest behind us and these cherries? And what does that mean about how I engage with my goals? Engage with that meaning finding. If you aren't separate from me, if you aren't separate from the little bugs in the soil underneath us, how would you be in the world? How would you act? And I might even say, like, even just look at that beautiful cherry. Like, is that this cherry right here? Is this cherry separate from you?
I'm not there yet.
I mean, it kind of looks like it is, right? It's like you're there, the cherry's here. Or else I'll do it for me. I'm here. I know, this is me, it's my body, my mind, my consciousness. This is the cherry. Great, so I put it in my mouth. Is the cherry me? Not really. It's in my mouth, I'm chewing it up. Okay, I swallow it. It's coming down. It's like starting to get to my belly.
Is like damn near close to dissolving it.
Is the cherry me? Well, not really. It's like maybe kind of on its way. Like, wait, now it's getting broken down into these like different molecular components and like feeding my cells. Like, when is the line? Can you actually find the line between me and everything else?
So I've had like a couple moments where I experienced that oneness people talk about. Like there was one time I did like a really long sauna and I was just like really just in my bag that night, and it was raining and I was out of my front porch or out of my front lawn. It was raining. I'm like tired from the sauna, but like my mind's going, all this stuff, and I'm lying out naked in the rain, in the pouring rain, looking up at the stars and the moon. And it was just in this incredible, albeit brief, but meaningful sense of oneness and like interconnectedness with everything. But like, I don't feel that every single day. At least not to that extreme. Like what you were talking about, like those experiences you had out in the desert, like how do you bring that into yourself? Like you don't have that sense of oneness all the time. I don't know how to create it I don't even know if it would be at least the point I'm at right now, I'm not able to facilitate that feeling over an extended period of time. Especially not like if I'm doing other stuff. Like if I was like working, like doing like just like anything, I wouldn't be able to have that because it's such like a complex and like rare feeling that like it's not like readily accessible. So like I can't imagine what a life would be like when you feel like that if you had like a full, like true sense of oneness over long periods of time. Because like I would be so frustrated because, but maybe you wouldn't be, because you would realize like that they're all you, and like that you make mistakes too. Depends on how deep you go into it. But like if you see us cutting down the forest and you really believe like that we are one system, like you'd get really frustrated.
Absolutely.
By it.
Absolutely.
So maybe we just need to bring the psychedelics and the meditation experience into the big pharmaceutical companies, into oil and gas, and into the government.
Yeah, it really begs the question, like, what would the status quo look like if
the people in power were really influenced by that?
Yeah.
Because like it's always like, I'm thinking like a king versus the peasants or something like that. The king would be the status quo in the whole family, and then the peasants rise up. They want change, and then a new thing. So maybe it's like a parliamentary democracy or something like that. But like, I guess that's kind of the same thing, because then the peasants kind of like get integrated more with the king. But like if you think of this like psychedelic revolution, like almost not even just that, but like the whole like, imagine that being like a center for like all the new ideas, like the meditation, all that stuff, like questioning, if that like actually gets eaten by the people in power, by the king, like that would be a crazy world to live in.
Pretty exciting.
It is pretty exciting.
It's pretty exciting, and there's a blending that kind of needs to happen, and I think is happening, especially with a lot of the scientific research. So people have known the power of meditation for thousands of years. It hasn't been a question like, is this worth doing? Well, in the last couple decades, now we have all this scientific equipment, and so Western science can like hook you up to all these wires and be like, oh, your brain is changing when you meditate. Or
have
like,
you seen the brain scans before and after psilocybin experiences of like the level of neuroplasticity? Like your brain is just firing.
I believe
all interconnected parts that never talked before.
Yeah,
are now talking.
That's really cool that they can look at that as science.
Yeah, they're fMRI scans.
And because there's so many people that's the doorway for them. They're like, well, I don't know about this meditation or this psychedelic experience. Like, I need to know if the science supports it. And so, that's really powerful to start to do some research, or even be okay with doing the research on psychedelics. Like, that's a big step. We're going to find some really cool stuff. We already are. But I think that's what we need to get to that level you're talking about, where the king is meditating and like taking the medicine, you know.
Because then we really wouldn't even need to overthrow him. Our job would be way easier. Because he would, if we can just like Trojan horse that, then he could do our job he could accomplish all the goals for us.
Yeah.
Sending him a little secret.
Absolutely. Yeah, let the fungi take care of it for us.
Yeah. I mean, I read this crazy, Stealing Fire was a crazy one. It was talking about like, just like all these things, like the float tanks and the meditation and the psychedelics that like all these like high performance teams are using, and like how big like Navy SEALs, teams at Google, like they got things in the government,
sports
like private
teams,
yeah, exactly. Like everyone is seeing profound benefits. I think one of the ones for the Navy SEALs especially was the ability to work in a team. Somehow, like through their experiences, they continue doing it. I think it was like the meditation and the floating or whatever things they use specifically. I don't know if they use psychedelics in that case. Saw like a huge increase in like efficiency working as a team. Practical, real world, tangible benefits from these like things that have been in flux in favor for so long, and like now they're actually being adopted and having like real world benefits.
Yeah, even like CEOs and stuff, you know, they're recognizing like, oh, I can be in tip-top shape if I'm like taking care of my inner world. If I'm like really doing these practices where I'm aligned and centered and integrated and focused, and taking care of my emotions.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's a big thing, especially for men, is like doing this inner work so that I can care for my emotional world. And there's just historically, like, men have in this culture
Suppression.
we haven't been handed down a lot of tools to do that, and that's another huge interest of mine, is like how can we change the narrative around how men engage with emotions, and how can that benefit everybody? There's so many problems with this, like, patriarchal
top down kind of like total control of your emotions,
total control,
approach to it.
suppressing feeling to like
you always think, like, when I was talking with Molly, like a psychologist that is dealing with someone who has a fear of elevators brings the person to the elevators and slowly, like, tries to bring them to it, presses the button, goes in, goes out, and then eventually takes the elevator out. It's like confronting that thing. It's like people being willing to do that.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I was in a men's group last week, and it's a very simple exercise we did. All we did is a circle of men, and you just looked inside and you named the physical sensations in your body to the group, and you named your emotions to the group without any explanation of, like, I'm feeling anxious because, like, this happened, or like I'm feeling shy because blah blah blah. You just were
giving
there,
yourself freedom to really experience those things.
Yeah, just say, oh, I'm feeling nervous, I'm feeling some shame, I'm feeling excited, and have that. It's almost like we're reconnecting something in our brains that's been disconnected, where it's not okay for men to, like, be real about how they are, be real about their emotions.
Oh my God, how would it being real ever be a bad thing?
Yeah, well, it's not safe sometimes, but it's a good question. So, I need to pee.
Yeah, go pee. Keep going, just go off the side of the deck.
Get that on recording, huh?
Yeah. I mean, no one cares. Okay. So, I'm going inside too.
I'm going inside.
Great. I'm going to talk to myself. Okay. I equate nihilism with a feeling, like, of untetheredness, of, like, a disconnection from reality. But at the same time, I associate with a disconnection with reality to like that lack of desire, lack of attachment, like one of the higher part of, like, basically the goal of Buddhism. So how can those things be the same? And I think nihilism is bad. It's like, how can nihilism be bad and be directly correlated with one thing, and then the absolute highest thing that I can imagine be correlated with that same thing? It's like, you better be damn careful about your relationship to reality, because you don't want, like, I feel like there has to, I mean, obviously, it's so fucking annoying to always have to say it always comes back to balance, but really it is. It's being engaged enough with reality to desire to interact with it meaningfully, and want to change the world, and want to transform, and, like, want to love and do all the things that make life amazing, but then be separate enough to see that when everything falls apart, it just is, and it's okay. Because if you can have both of those, if you can, like, there would be a very, like, like, the Ubermensch would be basically someone, in my view, Nietzsche's Superman, like, the ideal psychological outlook of a man would be almost like a god complex combined with a type of god complex with meaning, like, deeply injected into every action you take, combined with a sense nihilism in a way that, like, nothing matters in the long term. I'm talking about how I think the ideal mode of being would be to have like a little bit of a god complex, to believe that you can really conquer anything and do anything, have meaning injected into all of your actions because you're working towards like a goal that like a moral thing that you know is true, but also have like, I guess, like the discipline almost to realize that this is all nonsense and that nothing matters or whatever. In the long term, you're gonna die. Like having those two things like combined together would allow you to take insane risks, which is necessary for success, but also like keep taking risks over a long period of time because it doesn't matter. But also like you have that potential in you. But I don't think, because I was thinking like you need to be careful about your relationship with reality, because it's easy to get like that guy you were telling me about that went deep on DMT and did it for like 2 months straight. Like he has an unhealthy relationship with reality. Unhealthy in the sense that it doesn't have any practical use to him. Maybe it's closer to the truth. Who the hell knows? But it's not good for like the people around him or the world nearly as much as someone who thinks that exactly what is in front of us is the only thing that matters, or like a super like the like archetype of practicality, like something like that. But like obviously it's somewhere, and I was like saying like I hate that I have to say the balance thing all the time, but it really is somewhere in the middle. It's never on either side of the spectrum. Like, which is annoying, like interesting that we as humans always seem to err on both sides of the extreme in all cases, in all situations, and when that's never the answer. So I guess it's like, no matter how annoying it is to have to say it, live like moderation and balance and integration, like all those things are kind of like the same concept of like the middle way. Like that's really like one thing I resonate like in all the things I've studied would probably be the middle way, because it's just like the thing that makes the most sense. It's like, don't starve yourself. Don't obviously the gold palace isn't going to make you happy or isn't meaningful to you, so go in the middle. Find something you care about, pursue it. It's like at the end of Candide, Voltaire says, toil your garden. So it's like, first, like, okay, what is your garden, if the garden's a metaphor? Like, is it podcasting, is it writing, is it like fucking being a doctor or some shit, I don't know. And then like going to work every day and like pursuing that goal because pursuing that goal like has real meaning to you. It's like all of those things are like interconnected, I feel like.
Yeah, the middle way is a huge teaching. It's just amazing. It makes me think of too, one of the things that is part of the curriculum I teach in schools and with educators around mindfulness is around the process that our minds tend to do, where we divide reality into two options. This process of making things dualistic. It must be either this or that. Like you were talking about, you know, how to pursue life. It's like either got to be this way or that way. And there's power in recognizing that our brains just kind of do that. We kind of bounce back and forth between these extremes, or even like an opinion of ourselves, like I'm either like the best or I'm the worst, or we put other people into boxes. And so to be able to collapse that and be like, wait, is reality that defined? And actually like, wait, aren't there this whole beautiful,
clearly it's a human like construct. I think that there's only two, like there's two clear options.
What's one of the reasons that I love paradox so much? Because paradox breaks our logical mind thinking, well, if it's not this, it must be that. So even what you were saying about like pursuing something with like all of your heart, but also not suffering or not caring if you don't get it, like it's kind of a paradox.
Yeah. But that's the way. I think it's through the paradox.
It's certainly a very intriguing way.
I can't imagine like a better mode of being than that. You get the meaning, you're actionable, you're going to contribute to the world, but you're also at peace with yourself and everything. It's like all of the things that almost seem mutually exclusive. Like, I think like it's either like the guy that lives in rags at the top of the mountain and meditates all day and has achieved enlightenment, versus like the shrewd businessman capitalist, or maybe not shrewd, maybe like actually constructive, that's going out and changing the world, but like it's never touched anything inside of. Maybe he's aligned in some way, but it's only through his work that he's aligned. Like, that's his only purpose, is through his work. It's like combining those two things somehow. I was like, imagine if you meshed those two ideals, meshed them. That's like the super person. Because like you have to have some level of like peace, I think, to interact, to live. Because if not, you're gonna be so off balance. Like, that's why I worry. Like, that guy you're talking about, the DMT guy, untethered from reality, floating off in space somewhere a little bit farther, not on the ground.
Yeah.
So it's like, you need to be a little bit. You need to be able to see the whole. You need to be able to see the absurdities and like be able to step back. You need to be able to float up and then come back down. And like, that's what I worry about, is like people getting lost and floating off into space. That would be the ideal. Like the trans. It's kind of just like a change in perspective, shifting between like the big picture and the micro.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that, Max.
I'm kind of just talking out ideas in my head.
I know, I love it. And what you said a minute ago is still stuck with me, that the way is through the paradox. I mean, I'm even just thinking about the questions I was asking you about the cherry. Is the cherry you? Are you separate from the cherry? What about now? You know, it's true that there is a difference between the cherry and me, and it's also true that there's no separateness. Like, can both be true?
Well, it can be. They both can be true if you have multiple true realities. That's why I like mine, or like my version of it, because something can be true here and not there.
Sounds like paradox.
Yeah. Or
Yeah.
maybe not, if there really are two different realities. Because that wouldn't be a paradox if if they're really not separate places, but like really were separate like fabrics, like two different types like metal would have different conductivity. Like, that isn't a paradox. Or like one substance, one like fabric would be magnetic and one wouldn't be. I mean, that's not a paradox. That's just like how it is. I mean, we can go back to I like talking about the shadow and integrating that part. That was pretty interesting for me.
Yeah, can I tell you about this exercise I've done with the shadow, which I believe is originally a Toltec practice, South American practice, and the shadow being the parts of me I've subconsciously suppressed, but actually they're like still kind of wreaking havoc in a certain way, and either it comes out in how I behave, or it's like a depression, or it's like influencing addiction, or there's something not working, but I can't see what it is. That's how I think about the shadow. And I did this activity with a therapist, with a polished piece of obsidian. Have you seen those? It's like an obsidian mirror.
Like a black stone, super.
Yeah.
Is it almost reflective?
Exactly. And so it's actually, if you think about, do you have your phone on you? Of course you don't. So look into my phone screen. It's black. Can you see your face? But it's different, right? You can't really see all the colors, and you're kind of distorted. And so the obsidian is like that, except a little bit more. So when you look at your reflection, you see it as yourself, but you don't look like yourself. And so the exercise is to blur your vision a little bit, and so that your sight can't actually see the whole reflection. It sees bits and pieces, and then your subconscious fills in the rest of the image. And so you see yourself, but you look very different. And you might see like a ghoulish figure, or a child, or an old man.
Interesting.
Because that's how our vision works, right? Like,
I was exactly going to say that. You have blind spots, and your brain fills them in.
Absolutely. And there's like, you know, those like little optical illusion drawings where you're like, oh, do you see the rabbit, or like the lady's head? That's the same thing, except you're doing it with your reflection. And so you get to view how your subconscious views you.
Oh, interesting.
You're like drawing out what's happening in my subconscious when I think about myself. And that's a way for the shadow to come forward, because it's hard to work with the shadow if it doesn't come forward.
Yeah.
If it's just buried, it's really hard to work with. But that was really effective for me, and I didn't need to do that very long before there was a lot to work with around that with my therapist.
Like, what do you mean?
So when I was doing that activity, I just kind of saw myself, like I said, kind of like distorted, and I saw an old man, and I saw this kind of like crazy looking ghoulish figure. And it was the days and weeks after that experience where the shadow like came forward, where I like watched some meanness and aggression and some like really kind of like disturbing thoughts come out, that then with the work of this guy I was working with, we could like work with that and be like, oh, I have this belief that I didn't even know I had, that's been kind of running my life, and like, wait, I need to address that. It's kind of magical in a way how it worked, but
it sounds magical because I've been
powerful.
trying to figure out how to talk to my subconscious, and I can't fucking do it. So it seems pretty useful if you really think it has, like, it allowed you to get in contact with parts of you that are usually uncontactable. Because I've been trying to get in there, get inside, and it is a fucking locked door, for me at least.
Yeah, it tends to be that way.
Like, in the book, I say it's like trying to crack open a dense iron ball with like a weak wooden mallet. It's like, I just have no idea what I'm doing. I'm like going around trying to find, or like I'm going into a dark cave or something with like a dick for a flashlight. I can't see anything. Like, I have no idea where I'm going, what I'm getting myself into, how far back this cave goes. I don't know much about it. Like, I know like what other people think about it, and I know like what I've experienced, that there's like when like I do something rash, not thought out, not rational. Like, what part of me did that? Thus acknowledging that there are multiple parts of you. Thus implying that there is some, like, what I think the goal is, like, to integrate totally. Like, that's what Jung's like whole thing was, to integrate everything. That's like the individuation process, is to integrate all of the different parts of yourself into one being, one chi being.
Yeah, I love that question. Like, when you react, like, wait, what's going on? Like, who, almost like all the different archetypes or aspects of me, like, who's driving the car right now? You know, like, who came forward maybe because they were scared or upset.
It's like the fucking kids movie, the one with all of them in the brain, the happy sadness with the emotions.
Oh,
but it's
yeah.
really like, maybe not. You maybe replace emotions with like the shadow and the ego and like the ideal, like the self or whatever.
Yeah.
Jung defines the self as the totality of all things, but I think like the self is itself only. I mean, depends. Like, you just like, it's just a different definition for it, for the self. But I think the self is like more like the ideal, because it seems like he doesn't leave space for the ideal, and I think that's maybe one of the most important characters in this, like, in this book type, like this, in this play, like this competing thing. And like, the self is the thing you're constantly moving towards, whether you know it or not. Like, you need to leave room for that, because that's like that's the one you want to like be driving, honestly.
Like your highest self.
Yeah.
Your like kind of
Like
individual
whatever
highest self.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Your individual highest
And that's a
self.
little different than being like self with a capital S, which is like everything in existence, like all consciousness. Is that kind of what you're saying? Is like
Yeah.
creating the distinction in language?
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's a little bit easier to access your higher self than to like tap into like.
Because you're so different. Like, what part of you would you use to think about the totality of all your pieces?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You wouldn't.
Yeah,
You would
it's
only
like a
be able
doorway
to-
there.
You would only. It's a paradox because you can't, like, you can't combine all of your pieces without like the person doing the combining being the totality of all of your pieces.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, is it even possible to get all the way there? Like, I don't even know how you really integrate all those pieces, like, when you're so like not in communication with them.
Mm-hmm. Kind of seems like that's the first step, doesn't it?
Yeah, talking with them. Exactly. That's like what the meditation and the journaling thing is.
Mm-hmm.
It's like to be in communication, or like at least part of it. Like, I feel like going down in the depths, like max depth, is to get past the surface, drill down, rip it open, take the ladder down, and go exploring and see what's down there, and like create a list of what it is, see what's, just like take an analysis of what's down there and what you could possibly do with that information. Because like sometimes maybe you go down there and you get lost again and you have no way to get out and you're stuck. Like, this is a question: if like, would knowing the truth help you in the real world, or like would it have any practical applications? Like, I feel like say hypothetically that we're living in an 11-dimensional world and we can only interact with 3 spatial dimensions and 1 time dimension, and so there's 7 other dimensions that we're not in contact with, that we don't interact with, that are actually part of reality, that it would totally skew what we think reality is, unravel every belief that we possibly have. Say that's true and I think that. What good does that do me? Even if it were true, it does almost no good, it seems like to me, other than... Sorry, I didn't give you a chance to answer. It seems like it does almost no good other than the fact that, like, it makes you realize how little you know. But, like, it doesn't, like, help me that much. It only kind of makes me more confused.
How do you know?
Because I think, well, I don't know. Wait, what do you mean? How do I know?
How do you know that it wouldn't be helpful?
I don't know. Would you think it would be?
Well, I think it's a useful question. And if I explore something thinking that it won't be useful, it probably won't be useful. But if I explore something and think, oh, what's here? Who knows what could happen? I don't know the answer to your question, but I just like the question, and I'm kind of a seeker type, so that's my jam. Is I want to know, I want to live my life from my deepest understanding of what is true. Like that's when if you were to ask me, what are you here to do in this life, that would be the most kind of clear answer I could come up with right now.
What?
To engage with the world from my deepest understanding of what is true. And I would also say, on behalf of love.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's, everyone's got their own
that's pretty
thing,
chill,
but like,
I that.
I'm really into like, let's find out what is really true and see how that influences.
But like, why?
Life.
Why do we feel such an intense desire to find out what's true? Like, if it doesn't do, I mean, I don't know. I guess just like, why? Because I feel that same instinct to put truth above practicality too. Like, why is truth the highest and most commonly shared moral?
It's a good question.
I don't even know how you would begin to like start answering it. I have no answer.
Can I tell you a story?
Fuck yeah, tell me a story. I'll relax.
So this is a I'm gonna do my best with this. This is a story that I heard from Alan Watts, if you know that name.
Cool. Yeah.
And he was sharing a Hindu idea around the universe as drama.
Mm-hmm.
And so the concept is this. Everything that exists is one unified, indivisible, infinite consciousness. Brahman, God, the self with the biggest capital S. And so that's you. That's who you are.
Mm-hmm.
So what do? You are everything. You can do whatever you want. You are this Godhead. Do you just sit there doing nothing in your infinite vastness? Well, maybe you do that for a little while, but maybe you'd get bored with that.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you'd want to like play.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you'd want to explore and like get lost, create worlds and get lost in them. And if you did that for a while, maybe you'd want to go even further. Maybe you would want to create a world so enthralling and amazing that you get lost in for your own entertainment,
Mm-hmm.
that you forget who you are.
Mm-hmm.
You forget that you're God. You forget that you are this undivided infinite consciousness. And you think that you're an individual walking around this life.
Very cool.
And so the universe as drama is that this physical reality is a drama. It's a play. It's a play for your self, capital S self, to just have the experience of being an individual human and like have the excitement and the heartbreak and the sorrow and the suffering and the physical body and be so lost. You're like, who am I? What am I doing? What's my purpose? And then maybe you get these glimpses of remembering, or you have a glimpse of like experiencing oneness, and then you get lost again. Or maybe in some versions of the play, you're like completely enlightened and you come back to knowing yourself as everything. So that's the story and a way to kind of reconcile, what does this life mean if I know myself to be this infinite consciousness, this everything. And so your question around like, why do we want to know the truth? It just made me think of that story as like, that's like the plot line of the play. This person who's like lost and is like, who am I? What am I doing? What am I supposed to do with my life? Like, am I supposed to do this for work? Or like, what does success mean? Like, that's trying to find the truth is like, it's like the plot line of this great drama.
Yeah, I think, or that made me think of this like story that I've kind of told myself, is that like, you are a direct product of the universe, but you also are the universe. And so this girl Rachel, my friend, came on the podcast, and she was like, "Can I tell like what I think, like what I like the three things I think about the world?" Only the first one stuck with me, and it was super simple. It was, you are the universe experiencing itself. It's like it's what this guy Tim Freak was saying, like it's oneness in relationship to the whole, and the one and the whole are the same. And it's like kind of like the individual is the whole system, but it's also the individual experiencing the whole system, experiencing itself.
Yeah.
But and then like if you think about it like that, if you are the universe experiencing itself, why? Well, maybe the universe wants to. Maybe the universe is just like you, if that's not too human. Maybe the universe just wants to learn about itself, and you are a tool, like a microscope almost, or a vessel, for the universe to better understand itself.
I absolutely, I love it.
I feel like these are all not really. I mean, like they're not the truth in a practical, well, what do I want to say?
Is it breaking your brain a little bit?
It's like, I really think that it's just atoms and the universe is just like giant soup of all of them, and then it's a bunch of stars and galaxies, and that all of the things we're talking about are human constructs to give meaning to, I don't want to say an otherwise meaningful life, but a giant mess of atoms. Like, alright, infinite explosion, still continuing, Big Bang. Life rises. Billions of years later, somewhere, maybe 100,000 years ago, maybe 20,000 years ago, maybe 5 million years ago, consciousness arises. What are you supposed to do with that? Like, now that we are conscious, that's like the question. Like, what is our purpose? What are we supposed to do with this thing that is like an emergent property of life that is so new? Like, it's, I guess, like the thing that everyone does constantly is like make sense of it and rationalize it and like ask yourself questions about like what it is. But like really, that's not like, if you think about it big picture, this whole planet could explode and it just doesn't change anything. Like, we are too small to have any significant difference in the grand scheme of things. In the long term of time, in space, like, we really are nothing. And it's like, it's so funny, like, when I get wrapped up in my own little life, or like, my computer's taking too long to load, I'm like, bro, it doesn't matter. You idiot. You're so dumb. You're so small. You're so insignificant.
Well, that reminds me of your experience where you had the sauna and you're lying on the ground. Like, sounded like an expansive experience. Whereas being upset at the computer is like this little tiny thing, but like remembering the expanse of things can like take us out of that suffering and focusing on the tiny things.
Maybe like that question you were asking about, like how can you facilitate, like, or how can you make it easier for people to be like more accepting of changing their ideals or ideas, would be to just like constantly keep that in mind. Like those, if I could, like, maybe not like the only things that I wish I could do, but like two cool things, or like it would be interesting to see if everyone was constantly like just in a process of reconciling their own death and reconciling the fact of like how insignificant they are in the grand scheme of things, which are kind of like one and the same, because really like you're just gonna die and everything's gonna die.
It sounds like you're saying remembering the ego, like remembering the role of the ego. Like, when am I thinking that this is all about just me? When am I like taking stuff personally? And can I remember on an ongoing basis to let go of that and see the whole?
Yeah. That would be great. If everyone could do that often. Or if like it could somehow like pop in like in the right moments where someone was gonna make a rash decision like based on their ego or something. They were gonna like shoot some guy because he cheated on your girlfriend, or he like got with your girlfriend or something. Like if that could come up into that moment and realize, oh, that guy's gonna die without me. Like, I don't really need to kill him right now. Like, fate's gonna take its own course. Let it be. Accept. Let go. Life is just, you don't really have control over it. That's like why I was talking about before, like when you went inside a piss, I was like, how do you find a balance between, because you want to be both far and like the balancing back and forth thing. That's what I just came back to. It's like You want to be far enough away from, like, detached enough from reality to be able to, like, see it clearly and be able to move, like, almost more like water or air, like, super, like, flowy with it, not, like, become so, like, dragged down by it. Exactly. Be detached enough to not be, like, dragged down by reality, but also engaged enough with reality where you feel like you have some type of, like, purpose or, like, need, or, like, it feels like inside of yourself you need to be interacting with it meaningfully, or, like, to do something, or, like, to help other people, like, somewhere in the middle of those two things, along with, like, those two things coming together, and then the practical and the old wise man. Similar kind of combinations of, like, opposing ideals that, if combined and meshed, would be fucking awesome to see.
I could not agree more. Yeah. And from my kind of position, I'm really interested on how do we make this accessible, the contemplative technologies. How do we make those accessible? Because not everyone has the ability or the income to, like, or the time to go on, like, you know, pay $1,000 for a deep meditation retreat. Like, that's not available to everybody, and
Definitely.
you know, wouldn't be part of the culture or something they'd even know about. So one of the reasons that I'm really lit up about the organization I work for, Peace in Schools, is the idea of taking these contemplative technologies of meditation and mindfulness that have their roots in Buddhism and all these other indigenous, beautiful practices of being present, and give them away, offer them in public schools to everybody. So everyone has the opportunity to take these practices and, like, explore the stuff you're talking about, and, like, find out who they are, and then also how to apply it to the world, and find out what it means to be detached in a certain way but still, like, pursuing goals. So that's the key for me. I'm not really interested in practices that only some people can afford, or that's only available to some people. And that's why I think that this, like, going back to the plant is really cool. And obviously psychedelics are not very accessible, but I think we're moving in that direction. And even just going out into the forest like this, or going out on a wilderness rite of passage, there's deep wisdom here. Like, how can we make that accessible to people?
Is it here or is it here?
Good question. There's something about being immersed in the natural world.
Definitely.
That is a very powerful doorway to wisdom, to knowing the truth, in my experience.
Definitely, because it feels like it, like, forces you to take you out of yourself a little bit more.
Yeah.
And, like, realize that, oh my god, these giant trees, I didn't put them there.
Even just seeing the way the forest works, you know, you're like, oh, is this fern really separate from the soil? This tree that died and fell over and has 20 trees growing out of it, like, are they really separate? Did it really die? Like, what are we even talking about here? It's just this beautiful dance of life. All these things just growing and moving. Like, what does that mean when I take that back into my life with my family and my relationships and my job? And so I'm really lit up about, like, wilderness areas being accessible to people, like protecting these areas that hopefully are public and available for people to go to for this doorway.
So there's external reality and then your own personal reality that you kind of simulate, right? Or, like, at least following my line of reasoning. Like,
Yeah, I'm with you.
It's like when you go, not even, like, just like the psychedelic experience, whether you're, like, writing a book or reading a book or something, and you go somewhere else, it's the same. It's like, it's this concept of, like, worlds within worlds, which, like, I'm so obsessed with. Like it's so hard for me not to, like, become too long, because I will go world within world, and then in that world within world, and then within that third world within world, and then keep going until, like, I get lost and have to, like, I have to have the discipline to pull myself back from it, because I don't know why I love the feeling of going worlds within worlds. It's almost like there's only knowledge, like, or maybe that's just like a rationalization of why I like doing it. Like there's something that's inaccessible here that might be accessible like through like a tunnel, like through another like simulated thing. So maybe like that's what the universe was thinking, if the universe were to think. Maybe I'm not getting everything I'm here, so I'm gonna like simulate a little world and see what's going on in there.
I mean, I'm so with you. So with you.
In my book, or at least, so there's like this one. There's this kid who has a month left to live, but he's like writing a bunch. He's just vibing with writing. Yeah. One of the stories he writes is about it's basically me and Zach here in Portland, and we go out in the forest and we find this magical tree, and we get like super sucked into it, and we go down there, and there's all of the most famous philosophers and thinkers and scientists in history underneath this tree. It's like Plato and Aristotle and Einstein, like Newton, like the giants of human history, chilling there, thinking, growing synthetic foods, doing meditations, like all these like crazy experiences like that I associate with like the highest things in each category, whatever. But come to find out, if I can spoil it a little bit, is that the whole world down there is, I mean, it's fiction, so you gotta give me a break a little bit. But really, that whole world is running on a computer that Granddaddy built inside the house. It's a simulation, and so they're going in. Alex, which is me, stays and like he's interacting with the simulation. He's having these like dialogues with all these people in like these different situations, and he's like learning and he's loving it. Lee leaves early because he's like, these people are ghosts. We don't know these people are real. And then he comes out, and then like once they find the room where the simulation is, and they realize like there are different levels of consciousness for some of the things. It's like it's a crazy thing, not what they were expecting at all. But the fact that it's a simulation, they realize Leah, the little brother's like, well, if that was a simulation and that felt really real, how do we know this isn't a simulation? And then it's like, then it maybe makes a point, like, maybe Granddaddy achieved the highest possible, maybe in that story, the whole purpose of the entire universe is to create a world within a world, is to create another simulation. So it's like, whatever the base simulation is, the purpose of the one below it is to, in turn, again, to build another simulation for them to discover more, and maybe the one above it like can peek into there and harvest the knowledge out of it for them to do the work themselves. I just wanted to tell that story because I feel like you would vibe with it.
I mean, it sounds like what we've been talking about.
Yeah.
It sounds like what we've been talking about with the universe's drama. It sounds like what we've been talking about with the shadow. And in
what way, the shadow?
Like what you were saying, like wanting to go deep into the subconscious. Right? It's like,
oh, if you think that's
here's this level, I want to go into the deeper level. You know, you were talking about simulation, but another way is just to like go into like the subconscious world or the dream world as a simulation. Like what's there to learn to bring up to the next level.
Yeah. Well, one thing, if you want to talk about going down in the depths, this dude, the main character Kay, he has basically a panic attack about accepting his own death. And so he's freaking out. And basically, he falls over the ledge of this giant cliff into the abyss. And on the way down, he breaks into the 5 portions of his self. And so the shadow, the ego, the anima, which is the female part of the male, and the animus, which would be the male part of the female, and the self. And I think that's it. 5 different characters that make up himself, like the 5 different portions of the self that Jung talks about, breaks up into 5 separate characters and lands at the bottom in like a giant pile. And then basically they go on like a spiritual type quest in the desert of Kay's unconsciousness. And the whole, like each one of them has an individual like task or like process they need to go through to like in the hopes of integrating themselves together. And slowly throughout each one, so it starts out with the self, who I imagine as the personal, like the ideal self, like what you were talking about, that distinction, like the personal self, not the all-encompassing self. The personal, that self has to, what does he have to do? He like gets blessed by an old man and basically says, you are not better than these people, like you are the same as them. And like through a deep understanding of that, fuck, sorry, I forgot one. But this is more important, the persona, the thing that you project out on the world. Like the mask you wear, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
So, long story short, all these people have to go through these different like challenges that progressively integrate themselves together. So like the persona has to go in like a boiling bath or as like a type of cleanse, and then they become integrated. And at the very end, they're all integrated in the one, but the piece left to be reconciled is the shadow. And so he's kind of like slightly more dominant, but everyone's inside of him now. Like they're almost all the way there. And this dragon pops up. And like usually you think of fighting the dragon like you would slay it, but the shadow like meditates under the acacia tree and talks telepathically with the dragon, in showing like the power of the unification that it's able, like that they've gained, and like thus choosing peace and like honest conversation versus fighting. The shadow becomes integrated, and then Kay wakes up from his thing.
That's so cool.
Nice,
It's like each of the aspects of the self had to go on a little hero's journey.
Exactly. Within the world of Kay going on his own hero journey.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was like...
I can't wait to see that book, man.
Well, whenever you want.
I can't wait to see it.
It's definitely given me... Because, like, I guess it's what I'm trying to, like, because you don't know. Imagine if someone came knocking on your door and you, like, fully believed that you were going to die in 1 month, and it was, like, certain. There was nothing you could do about it. Like, you're pretty much only within yourself. Like, maybe you're posted up around here. Like, you can't, like, go traveling. It's like being left out in the desert and knowing that. Like, it's only you. This kid has no idea what he's doing. So, like, his solution to it is basically, like, create worlds within worlds and bury yourself in them. And, like, almost, in a way, like, hide, like, both accept death. Like, he's pretty chill with death at this point. Like, he knows it's coming. Like, there's nothing he can do about it. But, like, he's burying himself worlds within worlds, almost, like, subconsciously trying to escape from it. That's where I'm at so far.
It's such a great, like, allegory or story, because we all know we're gonna die. You know, yes, it's about this character who only has 1 month, but, like, actually we're all in that situation. It's just, instead of a month, it's hopefully a longer period of time. And so what do you do with that acknowledgement?
Exactly.
How do you proceed? Do you want to just proceed in fear the whole time, or do you want to proceed in a different way?
Exactly. Like, it's a month for life for a reason. Like, a month for life is just like that concept that you were talking about, like condensing your entire life into a month. Like, you want to experience all the things you want to experience. Like, you want to feel like it, of course, is a balancing with death. Like, you want to feel like there's an urgency where you want to, like, go out and do stuff and learn and transform, like, now, but also, like, whatever the opposite of that would be to, like, I don't know if that would be, like, just realizing that I'm going to die and that just, like, whatever I do doesn't really matter because I'm going to die at the end. That's, like, why, like, no one talks about death, so I'm, like, so loving talking about it with you because everyone else is too scared to talk about it.
Yeah, it's pretty taboo.
Yeah,
topic.
Like, why? It's literally the only thing that all of us will one day experience.
Yeah, that's absolutely.
It's the only thing that every organism has in common. Virtually. I mean, I'm sure there's a scientific answer. Everyone converts some ADP into ATP, but no, I mean, not everyone. Death is the main thing. Life and death. Like,
yeah, and there's so many stories about death in the underworld, so many myths that it's you know, you said we don't talk about it very much, but, you know, looking back in history, like, there are so many stories about it. Like, people did want to talk about it. It was this kind of like mysterious place to get wisdom from.
Oh my God, the Egyptians?
Yeah.
Bro, well, sorry, I didn't know if you were gonna say anything, but
no,
like
yeah,
one of
go
the,
ahead.
I think like the oldest book that we have are called the Pyramid Texts, and it's literally a fucking manual for how to make a successful journey into the afterlife. Like the oldest book that we have from the Egyptians is this giant like handbook basically for how to transition from this world into the next. Like, people have been fascinated like with the idea of it, and now what's left? Like, is there even room to create myths anymore?
I hope so.
But so much can be explained away by science. Like, we are all just atoms, and I mean, maybe like the idea of consciousness would be like the worst example because it's not understandable by science. But like, so much of the world is understandable through scientific observation that like there's only a few pieces left, I feel like, that where religion has a place. So like for me, it's like really important that I am religious, like in those specific circumstances, because I feel like there's already so much that the religion doesn't really apply to. So like making space for it in a way that is real. Like, what happened before the Big Bang? No one knows. Can do religion there? Consciousness. Maybe there's something there that isn't fully scientific.
Yeah. I mean, you make me think about like mystics, where instead of being followers of a religion, they said, no, I'm gonna check this out for myself. You know, like, so many mystics had a kind of scientific perspective in the sense that they were wanting their own direct experience of what is true, not just believing what's in the dogma or the texts. And I really relate to that, and one of the reasons that I've been drawn to Zen Buddhism is for that reason.
Exactly.
Zen Buddhism is somewhat of a departure from the dogma, and very much more focused on like, here, I'm not going to tell you what's true, Max. Come here. I'm going to help you sit so that you can know for yourself what is true.
Yeah, that's why I'm much more. I resonate a lot more with Eastern religion compared to Western religion, because Western religion is based on like scripture and prayer, versus Eastern religion is based on self-reflection, introspection, and meditation.
Yeah.
Which seemed to me like a much more like authentic and like useful mode of inquiry than like the repetition. Because if everything has changed, then the scriptures like have to be wrong. Well, everything has changed, but also human being. What I was saying before, like we are the same like creatures running around the forest, just in a new environment. Like, that's what like why like you have to give. Jordan Peterson says like, if not the Bible, then what? It's like, yeah, look within yourself is like what I would say. But like, you can't totally like throw out the Bible, because it is this giant accumulation of old ideas and old stories, like archetypal stories. Like, that's what, like, hearing about like the story, because I'd never heard anything about the Bible before like this year. I never even knew the story at all, and I still don't really know, but I know like a few pieces. There was this like created the first two people, like Adam and Eve, and then they gave birth to these two sons, and then there's like the heaven and hell that result from the two. It's like instantly, almost at the very instant at the beginning of the Bible, it brings to light that like duality that you were talking about instantly, between the heaven and hell, between the good and the evil. And that's like it may have reinforced that, but clearly that was true even at the time, for them to put that so close to the beginning. Like,
it's
that
true that their minds created duality in the way that we still do.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was just like weird to see the things that like those stories are still like pretty applicable, or if they're not applicable, then at least they help like understand in some way.
Yeah. Yeah. What great tools to contemplate and understand like humanity through.
Yeah, it's just another tool.
Yeah. And that's I haven't read the whole Bible, but that's how I like to approach it, is like what's here for me to learn, rather than I need to believe this as true, unquestioned and without any question, you know.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I like that too a lot.
Yeah.
Like what me and Wally were talking about a little bit, well, we kind of touched on it, was like, what I want to say was like, religions are meant to be changed, I think. Like, the blind following of it, it's like this structure is being passed down. But like, you want the structure to change, like, evolve. So like that's why, like, she was like, is it right to cherry pick? And I'm like, well, like, why not? If like everything has changed and like the purpose is to evolve and like transform into some higher thing, if that's like a decent moral thing to like try to attempt to do, then why wouldn't you try to change this thing to make it like either more applicable now or like resonate more with you or the world today? Like, what possible harm would that do? Like, maybe then there's a piece that's like, well, part of why Christianity like got so popular and stuck on was because it's like just the straight teaching. Like, there was no change. Like, it's faith alone. And like the faith alone part of it was what like was the unifying factor. Was like, because religion is meant to unify, I think. Like Machiavelli used religion as a tool, to unify people, like to get people to kind of like exist in the same moral framework and just like be one a little bit more. I think. Because like we're all floating, we're all these individuals, at least it feels like it, and if there's like some faith that can combine us all, then that's great. But like how like this religion that you and me are like subtly saying that we both participate in, like this introspection religion kind of, like where is the unity in that? Like it's only, I mean, you can create the unity at the individual level by acknowledging that you are one in relationship to the whole, and scaling that up would work, but like it's not so like in your face. The unity piece isn't as in your face as like a traditional religion.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Absolutely makes sense. And yeah, the mystics in religions were kind of on the outskirts, you know. They had to leave the unifying, agreed upon beliefs of a religion in a certain way to go and even have the mindset of like, oh, let me challenge this and find out for myself. So it's inherently a little bit of separating instead of unifying. And like there's even, you mentioned Western religion, or you know, Christianity as being less attractive to you because of what we're talking about. And one of my favorite Christian mystics is Thomas Merton, who is a Catholic. He was a Trappist monk. And he was so open to including the Eastern perspective on reality in his mysticism, in his explorations, and has these beautiful, amazing books and ideas. And I was raised Catholic and departed from that when I was a young man. And reading Thomas Merton, it's this integrating where he can take stories and ideas from the Bible and integrate it with larger perspectives. But what's interesting is that many kind of like traditional Catholic followers completely reject his works. Because he's too on the outskirts. He's not following close enough to what's prescribed. So I mean, I really think your question's really good. You know, religion is this unifying kind of power, well, if we're going to be challenging our beliefs and updating what we think about reality and ourselves, that's a challenging, a separating. Like how can we empower that? How do we create culture that connects us, even as we challenge and separate from the status quo?
It's crazy to think that all like the vast majority of Christians throughout all of European history were literally blindly following the words of the priests because the Bible was written in Latin and they couldn't read Latin.
Oh, that's
For
interesting to think about.
Like 7 centuries. I mean, like printing press was 1450-ish. Johannes Gutenberg, I learned that. And then like slowly, like who was it? I think it might have been John Huss, Janhus, who translated the Bible into whatever local dialect he knew, whether it was some German dialect, and they burned him at the stake. Why? Because they wanted total control and be able to. I mean, like, who knows what the priests were saying were in the Bible that wasn't that whole time.
That's pretty wild to think about.
Right?
Yeah, it's pretty wild. And you know, like the way that religion is mixed up with politics. You know, like the leaders of these countries or communities wanting to be in control and like using what you're talking about, like using religion as a way to control. You know, it gets really messy.
Yeah.
I mean, it still does today, but even just like your example of like people couldn't read, they just had to listen. Like that's what a way to keep your power over people.
Yeah. And it was like, it seems like the, you know, those equations I was talking about of like the synthesis of the new status, because I didn't say it, but I mean, that equation results in the formation of a new status quo that is then the basis, which then becomes the first thing which then becomes the status quo in the next equation that the new opposing force challenges. And then that synthesis then becomes the next one and then does like that. So it's like this repeating thing. But I feel like that process like exponentially increased once, like definitely with the printing press, and then like with the scientific and like revolution and enlightenment, where just like the sharing of ideas, like as the sharing of ideas increased, then the questioning and then the questioning increased, and then the challenging of the status quo increased. So it's like, why am I asking all these questions? Why am I searching for the truth? Well, the questions are a prerequisite to like action. Like you need to have a question in which like you're acting on behalf of. Like you don't just act. I mean, you act irrationally sometimes, but if you don't just act out of truly nothing, there's something, whether it's like unconscious or subconscious, or whether it's something you don't understand. Like you're always acting in reaction to something else.
Yeah, and how powerful is it when we are aware of what it is that we're acting from? You know, like instead of blindly acting from that place, like having the awareness to be like, oh, like this is what I've been like acting from, you know, like this is what I've inherited from my ancestors. This is what I learned in school. Like, wow, that's interesting. Maybe I want to not do that anymore. Or like maybe want to pick apart this part of the status quo and like do something completely different. It's like, it's empowering to do that.
To like discern which pieces, which beliefs you have are like original versus taught. Yeah.
Well, you were talking about like, where am I acting from? What question am I acting from? It's like empowering to know where you're coming from in a way.
To get that answer.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's like why I love like the feeling of like connection to the past, or like why you like history, or like why I like learning about like my grandpa or whatever, like old stuff, because like we are direct products of all of that. So there's like you can feel in this world where it's so easy to become lost as an individual in this giant soup of individuals. Not like the way to combat nihilism is to become deeply tethered in the ground and like feel connected in some way to the past, because it's realized you didn't just emerge. You emerge out of everything that has ever happened, out of everything that has ever breathed or occurred in the past. Like, you are a direct child of that. And then you go on as time progresses, if time does progress. I don't know. I don't understand time. Then you become the father to all future things in a way.
Wow.
Meaningful.
It's like what you're pointing to is like inherent purpose and meaning. That's what you are. You are the culmination of everything behind you, you know, from the past, and you are the father or the mother or the parent of what's to come.
Yeah.
What a noble purpose that is.
Yeah.
In itself.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing that I like about what you're saying is that recognition seems like it lives in the present moment. You know, we were talking about the present moment being all there is. But when we sit here and we think about everything that happened in the past and our ancestors, and we can be like, wow, look at that perspective. And we compare that with like, wow, everything that's to come. We only have those perspectives when we're right here, right now. Instead of being trapped, you know, you can get trapped in the thinking about the past and not have perspective, or trapped in worry about the future. But there's something amazing about that place right now that can hold it all.
I guess I was trying to formulate a question to ask you to elaborate on your, like, how you would speak to the here and now, but like the best way that I could come up with would be that I can't elaborate on it. I can't speak about the here and now, because it is both everything and nothing. Like, I don't even know how I would use words to talk about this moment right now. Like, my brain can't come up, there's no words that I'm deeming are sufficient to talk about it. It's
Absolutely.
like a feeling of, I don't know.
Just being here.
Yeah.
Yeah, some of the most enlightened teachers, like Ramana Maharshi comes to mind as this like amazing enlightened Indian, kind of modern Indian guru, and he taught in silence. People would come to receive his teaching and he would be silent, and they would learn from his silence.
Did he post up at the top of the mountain?
I don't think so.
Well, there was a different guy, same guy, because we're all the same, that, like, he was at the top of the mountain, sage type guy, very knowledgeable about the world. People would come to him for wisdom. People would take this like long hike up this hill or this mountain and come to him for wisdom. And like, this is a story I've heard, so I don't know how true it is, but it's a cool idea anyways. That like there are different levels of truth. Because like the first, like the real answer is silence. That's like, if you can understand the silence, then you're understanding like the most base truth. And then like as soon as you open your mouth, then like the next one would be like, you are love, or something like that, or like something that's like just not far off from silence. And then like an actual diagnosis of the problem would be like 6 levels down from the actual truth. But like silence is the real truth. And that's like why, like one of the reasons why I like Taoism so much, one, because like I might have a skewed understanding of what it actually is, and so I just associate it with the ocean, this current that you kind of are able to follow if you like and you can ride it instead of swimming against it. That's one piece of why I like it, because like when I love the ocean. It's my source of revenue, and like I just resonated with a lot. But the other words is one of the foundational texts of Tao Te Ching. Its fucking first words are, the eternal Tao cannot be spoken. Like every time, like that's why sometimes podcasts and writing pisses me off, because I know that I'm only circumnavigating the truth. I can never get there.
Yeah.
Like as soon as I open my mouth, I'm in a sense lying. But that's the only thing we can do. It's like whatever like way we would be able to speak the truth, we aren't able to do. Just like, so like, why am I even doing these podcasts if I'm never going to be able to really get to the truth? Why are you in search of the truth if you're never really going to be able to find it?
What a beautiful question.
Good way to end it.
I
Keep going?
I think we've really gotten to the depths here, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the point.
I mean, what I would say as we're wrapping up is like, yes to that, and how beautiful that we are doing this podcast, and that we are like, even if we know that we'll never get to the truth by talking about it, like let's talk about it anyways, you know?
The journey over the destination.
Let's just go there. Let's go into the depths. Let's go to the max depth, knowing that we're never going to actually get to the max depth. Let's go anyways. Let's go exploring. What do we find?
Yeah.
And like, I mean, we're doing that.
I love that. Thank you, dude.
Thank you, Max.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That was amazing.
Can I give you a hug?
Yeah, fuck
Sweaty
yeah. I'm
hug?
so sweaty. I'm so sweaty. I'm so sweaty. Let's see. Definitely over 2 hours, I would say. Oh, 2 hours and 1 minute and 51 seconds.